I'm reminded that the question that keeps being asked around the world that has to do with prisons here in the United States is this simple question. Why do the United States imprison so many more people as a percentage of its population than almost any other country in the world? And she gave us the answer, because it's not about criminality. It's about controlling a part of the population. You pretend that they are criminals so you can put them in under the heading of criminal. But if you're trying to solve a social problem by putting people away out of the community in an enclosed space, and you can call it criminal, then you get the weird statistic that your numbers are off the chart relative to everybody else. And I have to tell you, because in large part the people in most other countries do not allow such a thing to happen. And as Americans, you ought to ask yourself, as I do, what is it about our country that allows such a thing to happen and to be perpetuated and to produce? You all know, and I don't want to digress, it costs much more per year to put a person in jail than to give them a decent job and an income. It is outrageously inefficient to do this. We may have a Department of Governmental Efficiency, but it didn't do anything about one of the grossest inefficiencies that this government has ever perpetrated on people. And if you can see the fakery of calling it all drug-related, it's the same thing. The story I told some of you before we went on the official program about those 76 people that have been executed by the United States because they were on a narco boat in the Caribbean or the Pacific over the last 3 months. Those are also being called criminals, being involved in the drug trade. That's what put all those people in jail, being involved in the drug trade. I went to school in the fanciest schools this country has. I was an undergraduate at Harvard, then I got a master's degree at Stanford, and I finished by getting 2 more masters and a PhD at Yale. I'm like a joke. And here's what I want to tell you. Every drug you ever heard of was always available in every room of those institutions that I ever visited. And who got arrested? Nobody. Who got invaded by the cops? Never happened. Which person of the young people there was worried that their drug activity would get them into trouble? None of them. This is a social issue, not a chemical issue. Okay, I want to talk to you about this problem of affordability. It's a big, long, fancy word. Don't be misled by it. It simply means what you suspect it means. We got a problem in that a lot of the things we need and want, we can't afford to get. Nor if we get one of them, we have to forego another one of them. It's been around a very long time. Not a new problem, not at all. But for a long time in the United States, roughly the last century until recently, mechanisms were found in the United States to give a large number of people an escape hatch, to give them a little extra money so that they could afford many things, more than their parents had been able to afford, and that was a sign that was important. For 100 years. The period is known historically, and it will be looked back on in the years ahead, as the period of the American Empire, when the United States became a global power. That was not always true. for most of the history of this country was not true. Remember how it began? I don't mean began with the people, the indigenous folks that were here. We all know the genocide that removed them. Now, if I look at the Europeans who come, they were poor in most cases. They were criminals back home, running away. People in awkward circumstances, which is what the phrase is in German. And they came here, and they had a fairly hard scrabble life. They were given land that had been taken away from the indigenous people and so forth. You know the story. But it was only really World War II. So, a lot of American history from the time of the Independence War of 1776 to World War II, 1942. That's a long time. We were not an empire then. We had been a colony of somebody else's empire, remember? The British. They had a big empire too. What's left of that? Nothing. You know what England is now? A poor, wet, cold island off of the mainland of Europe. That's what it is. It's one of the few countries of the Western world that's in worse shape than we are. Much worse. It is really serious what has happened to the empire once referred to as the sun never sets on the British Empire. Why? Because Britain has so many properties in Asia, Africa, Latin America, that literally as the sun goes around, as we go around the sun, there's always sunlight somewhere on what Britain owns. Now it's almost correct to say that the sun never shines on Britain. That's how far it's come. And before you laugh too much, that's what's happening to us. Now, you are living through it. I am living through it. I'm going to go through some details, but I don't want you to lose the big picture that I'll come back to at the end. The big picture is the empire is over. From 1945 to 2010, 2015, we were the top dog. All the other big, powerful capitalist countries and the socialist countries had blown themselves to bits in World War II. Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, China, boom, they destroyed one another, led by the old European empires. Hitler's slogan, Das Dritte Reich in German. My mother was born in Berlin. My first language is German, so I speak that language, still do. Hitler promised Das Dritte Reich means the Third Empire. He was going to make Germany an empire again. A kind of MAGA forerunner in more ways than one. And to do that, he invaded the Soviet Union. And that begins World War II. And they destroyed each other. The British, the French, the Germans, the Italians. They still haven't recovered. Immediately at the end of the war, the colonial people around the world realized, this is our chance. They're weak. They've destroyed each other. We can get independence. Led by India, a big jewel of the British Empire, they fought the battle. You all have heard or watched or learned about Mahatma Gandhi and that movement. That was a revolution against the British Empire. And the British did everything. Every ugly, violent, destructive thing you can imagine, and many that you don't imagine, to your credit, including dividing South Asia between Hindu and Muslim and all the horror that goes on about that to this day. As horrible and in some ways worse than what Israel is doing in Gaza. which is a rerun of these situations. The United States took over. As Britain withdrew, the United States moved in everywhere. And we were the king. You were born into that. You've lived your life in that. What you now have to come to terms with is that was a special period and it's done. And it's not coming back. You're going to live the rest of your life, whether you like it or not, in the decline of the American empire. And one of the results, I invite you to come to other talks. I'll be glad to go into many other aspects because it's shaping everything about your life. Your music, your dance, your diet, your dress, your education, your medical care, you name it. They're all being reorganized. It's not Mr. Trump who's doing that. It's the situation. That's why it was already underway before he became president, and it will continue long after he isn't president anymore. And I'm not here to defend or attack him. I'm not interested in that. And beware lest you be too caught up in the details of what he's doing to miss the picture of what's going on here. As the empire declines, and let me give you milestones so you can get it. The United States went to war in Vietnam. The enemy was the Communist Party of North Vietnam. The United States lost the war. You know who runs Vietnam today? The Communist Party of North Vietnam, because they won. You know who doesn't run Vietnam? The United States. You know why? Because they lost. I have to underscore this to Americans who live in an environment in which they don't seem to get it, what happened there. Now, I'll pick another one. Afghanistan. The enemy there is called the Taliban. The United States went to war against the Taliban, and the United States lost, and the Taliban won. You know how I know? Because who runs Afghanistan today? Let me tell you, in case you're wondering, the Taliban. That's a clue about who won and who lost. Ukraine is in the process of being lost. There you had the United States, all of Europe, and the Ukraine army, all going to work against Russia. Russia won. The West lost. That's why the Europeans are crazy these days about Russia. This is not the way this was supposed to go. The Russians were supposed to be defeated. Propaganda in this country transformed Mr. Putin into Joseph Stalin in order to facilitate the process. But nobody should be fooled. I could go on. Once upon a time, the dollar was the global currency. It isn't anymore. It now has to compete with the euro, but also the Chinese currency, the Indian rupee, all kinds of currencies that are becoming important. The empire is over, and the empire can't deliver the wealth it once did to the United States. The wealth that comes from having your currency be the world's currency. Your army controlling the whole world. The war in the Caribbean, the killing of those people in the boats, it's got nothing to do with drugs. That's the story you tell the American people because they're gullible enough to actually believe it. This is a part of a war to take over Venezuela, because it has the greatest, in case you're not aware of it, supply of oil under the ground in the world, more than Russia, more than Saudi Arabia. It is a jewel in the maneuvering around oil. And the United States is very embarrassed by having lost in Vietnam, lost in Afghanistan, lost in Iraq, lost in Ukraine, so it has to win somewhere. And Venezuela offers 2 for 1, a victory and the oil. What are you going to do? Is it possible? Yeah. I want to turn now to affordability. What's that about? It's when you can't afford to buy stuff. Well, everything that's happening in this country now, everything is about that. Everything is a process of making more and more of the wealth unaffordable to more and more of the people. I'm sorry, I don't mean to upset you. On the other hand, you do want to know what's going on. You're better off to know than to be hit by a tsunami because you were facing the wrong way. What do I mean? Well, you might be surprised at some of the things you all know are going on. I'm going to pull them together for you. Why in the world would a wealthy country, as Andrea James just reminded us we are, why would a wealthy country turn to the 42 million poorest people in the country who depend on the food stamp, the SNAP program, and take away their SNAP eligible, their ability to get the food. Food! Not a luxurious home, food for the poor. Why would you do that? Why would the leading political party, the Republican Party and Mr. Trump, take the lead in doing that? What a strange thing to do. Wait a minute. It isn't strange because it saves money. It's money the government doesn't have to spend on the SNAP program. Just like, firing huge numbers of public employees. You know, Elon Musk and that several months we all watched as they were bringing efficiency. I have been hired to do efficiency studies. If you do an efficiency study, you hire experts, you pay them a lot of money, and they study very carefully what's going on and come up with some suggestions. That's an efficiency study. Elon Musk knows that's an efficiency study because he buys them for his various operations, as all big corporations do. What he did for Mr. Trump and with Mr. Trump had nothing to do with efficiency. It had to do with the government saving a lot of money. Fire all those people. What do we need an education department for? Education should be left in the hands of the parents who know what's best for their children. That's exactly as honest as saying you're killing those people in the boats because they might be carrying drugs. Come on, you do know. You don't want to face what you're being told because it's demeaning to understand how little your leaders respect in you. I don't want to face it either. On the other hand, I get a perverse joy out of facing it. And you're subjected to it for the next few minutes. So, you save money with this. You call it efficiency. And you hope most people who efficiency. I mean, a good thing, efficiency. After 4 months, it peters out. You know why? Because people figure out this has got nothing to do with efficiency. And now the pushback begins. All those people thrown out of work, they go to court. They want their job back. The procedures that are in place about how you fire people were never followed. Remember, Elon Musk came in with his baseball cap and his limited mental capabilities and did his thing. I know we are supposed to believe that this is a genius. I know we're supposed to believe it. And many of us do, because we make an equation. If he's got that much money, he must be smart. Sad that you should believe that. After a few months, he couldn't do it anymore. So Mr. President had to come up with another way to save money. He shut the government down. Brilliant. 4 months of efficiency, and now Some months of nothing at all. We cut everything. We stop everything. Who does this kind of thing? Somebody who's desperate. Why would the president be desperate to do this? Stick it to the people who depend on food stamps. Lay off all those air traffic controllers, making it impossible for anyone to go on an airplane in the country, which, if you had half a brain, he'd know the biggest users of our airplanes are corporations. They're now going to be interrupted because they can't take a flight anywhere, whereupon the government has to stop being shut down, which, as we speak, is being voted in Washington. But be sure, he'll come up with another one. What is this desperation to save money by not spending? In order for me to explain that to you, which I'm going to do in a moment, I got to show you the connection to affordability. These are all specific ways of making affordability worse. He's taking away the capacity to buy from more and more people. The fired federal worker, the person who can't get the support for the welfare program they're getting, the air traffic controller who hasn't been paid for 40 days. And you know what he does? He has to go and borrow money to pay for the basics because he has no income and he has a mortgage to meet and he has this and he has that. So he borrows money. But of course, if he borrows money, he has to pay interest. Even if he gets his job back, even if he gets back pay, no one's ever going to give him that interest. He's out money, and quite a bit. Moreover, when he's out there looking, he can get a part-time job. And he takes it because it's some income. But now he's working hours, he's very tired. And when he goes back into that air tower at the airport, the airplane comes in, he's snoozing. And your life is over. Because you crash. Everybody with half a brain knows all this. What the desperation not to give people the wherewithal to buy. It makes affordability worse. Because all affordability ever was or is the relationship between the money coming in and the price you have to pay when you spend the money. That's affordability. You wouldn't mind the prices if your income were better. You wouldn't mind your crappy income if the prices were lower. This is not PhD economics, although that's a lot of what I had to learn. What is going on here? Affordability, let's start with your income. What you can afford depends on how much money you get. Okay? And that, for most Americans, is about how much in the way of wages you get. Well, who determines your wage? Who sets the wages? Well, the answer is the employer. When you sit down with the employer, when you look for a job, you have a conversation. Many of you have had it or will have it or know what I'm talking about. You sit down, you talk, I have to come Monday through Friday, I should be there at 8:30, and I should be ready to do this, and I should dress such a point in such a way. And then you get to that point, what am I going to get paid? Because that's a kind of big question. And the employer then says some mumble jumble like, well, the going wage for this activity here is whatever. And maybe you push back a little depending how much of an option you have and what kind of personality you got, and you work something out. But who has most of the cards here is the employer, right? If you don't work out, there are 27 people in the waiting room with their little resumes in their hand. The employer knows. Employers are, according to the U.S. Census, employers are 3% of the American people. Let me do that again. 3% of our people are employers, and that includes the self-employed. In other words, the wages of the whole society are determined by 3% of the people. And I'm now going to have to tell you, you're not in that 3%. You have to take it. Because if you leave it, who knows what else is out there for you. Another employer who's very aware of what the first employer offered you and will take that into account when offering you something. The other side of affordability is the prices you have to pay with whatever wage or salary you get. Well, let's ask the same question. Who determines the prices? Ready? The same people. The same 3%. If you've ever worked in an office, a factory, a store, were you called in as an employee to help participate in deciding what the prices would be of whatever it is you're helping to make? Of course not. You're a worker. You're an employee. You don't make those decisions. Those are made by the employers. They decide the prices they put on things. So let's see now. This is higher mathematics. The same 3% who determine your wage are the same 3% who are determining the prices you pay. If they want to squeeze you, this is the easiest thing to do. You just squeeze a little on the one end and you squeeze a little on the other end. And between the two, you get the squeeze done. You make more and more of the wealth of the country unaffordable. The biggest issue you all know in this country right now, rent. Housing is unaffordable. A healthy society spends, that work has been done, 24% of your wage on your housing. If you're spending more than that, you are being abused, ripped off. That, by the way, it's a universal number used around the world by the UN and everybody else. If you go to places like Vienna, for those of you that are interested, if you ever want to understand how a city, one of the major cities of Europe, Vienna, has solved its housing problem 100 years ago, it's because in Vienna, half the apartments are owned by the government or in a partnership between government and private. Half. And the wages are set as a percentage of your income. It's a spectacular success story, which is why you've never heard of it. You live in a country where we have 800 meetings every year about the housing problem. Much cheaper, take the people on an airplane, fly to Vienna, spend 2 hours, and you'll be done. No more problem. Just copy a popular. And you know, by the way, who did that? Socialists. Socialists in Vienna 100 years ago passed all that legislation, and it is so popular in Vienna that even when Vienna was a Nazi, part of Hitler's, the Anschluss, when Germany and Austria came together, even when they were governed by Nazis, they dared not do anything with that public housing because half the people would have voted them out of office in 10 minutes. The people of Vienna can afford a very nice lifestyle because the rent doesn't do to them there what it does to you here in New York, where the rents are so crazy. We just saw a remarkable election built around, among other major issues, rent. It's just a question of doing something either about the income or about the prices, which are set by the rich at the top, the 3% employers, who include all the richest people. Elon Musk is an employer. So are all those other people. You've got to do something about that, or else you will not solve the problem of affordability. And don't be fooled, please, by the endless efforts to fool you. When you're watching TV and you see an ad for soap, and there's a lovely young person in the shower soaping himself or herself up, and the announcer comes on and says, if you use this soap overnight, your sex life will get so much better. You giggle, just like you just did, because you know that that's nonsense. They just want you to spend money on that brand of soap. And so they hope you will by telling you this story. And yet you believe the equivalent when you're told about the economics. I'm going to give you an example. President Trump has imposed tariffs. And he has done that for a very particular reason. It has nothing to do with anything he says. He doesn't understand much about tariffs. Anyway, for those of us that are economists, it is a daily embarrassment when he opens his... Really, I'm talking about my right-wing colleagues too, who love him but are embarrassed by what he says. A tariff is a tax. It's just a funny name, comes out of history for that particular tax. It's like an income tax or a sales tax. It's just another tax. A president of any country can only tax his own people. When Mr. Trump talks, it's the tariff. I'm going to hit the Indians with a tariff. I'm going to hit the Chinese with it. He can't do that. He can't tax anybody but Americans. Just like we will not allow the King of Belgium to tax us, because that's Belgium. He can tax the Belgians, but he can't tax us. So the first thing is the tariff is a tax on Americans. Now, you may not have understood that, and I forgive you. Our president still doesn't get it. Or maybe he does, but it's very dangerous to be known as the president who adds to the taxes, especially for a Republican, which is a political party that has spent the last century standing against taxes. What a remarkable thing that the Republican president of the Republican Party that's always against taxes has just given us one of the biggest, worst tax increases we've ever had, these tariffs. If it didn't occur to you before, yeah, it should have. Well, you might say at least it's a tax that falls on business. And you're right. You know who pays a tariff? The business that brings goods or services into the United States that are manufactured or produced elsewhere. The tariff is it used to be called in American history import duty. But it's the same thing. It's just a different word. So if a French wine made in France comes here to New York, the importer, the American company importing the French wine, say pays $10 for that bottle of wine from France, now has to pay Uncle Sam the tariff on that $10 bottle of wine. That's a check that goes from the importing company to Washington, D.C. It doesn't go to France. Nobody in France pays the tariff. An American pays the tariff. But it's an American business. So you might want to say, gee, well, at least the president is taxing business. Wrong again. How is that wrong? Here we go. Two ways. Number one, before the tariffs were announced, that was in April of this year, we had something else. The big, beautiful tax bill. You may remember, a lot of publicity. What did the big, beautiful tax bill do? Drop taxes on business in America. Dramatically. And on rich people too. It was a wonderful gift of a tax cut. Why was it done like that? Because Mr. Trump wanted to be able to say to the business community, I'm going to hit you with this tariff tax, but don't worry, I'll cut your taxes first. That's like going into a store and noticing that the clothing is all 50% off and not being aware, as your cousin told you, that 2 weeks before the sale, they raised the prices. by double. And you feel really good until he tells you that. I'm here to tell you there is no tax increase for business. They got a tax cut to let them know not to squawk when the tariffs come down. And what are the companies doing that are supposed to pay the tariff? They have to pay. They send it to Washington, the tariff. But then they do something else. They raise the prices of those goods to you and me, saying to you, we really wish we didn't have to do that. But because we have to pay the tariff, we are having to raise the price. And you poor people believe this horse shit. Why? Why? Everything I've told you tonight, you knew anyway. There's nothing new here. I'm just putting it together in a way that you kind of now have to look at it, don't you? Your coffee is going up. You notice that. The latte costs you more. Part of the excuse for that, coffee comes from other places. The United States can't grow coffee. A little bit in Hawaii, a little bit in Louisiana, but not enough to make a difference. And we consume one hell of a lot of coffee. And that mostly comes from Brazil. And so the excuse is, well, the tariff on coffee coming in. Those businesses have no need of that. They got a tax cut. Took care of that for them. This is just grab it because you can. And the American people are upset that the money flowing out of their wallets to pick up that coffee once or twice a day is adding up. And they're kind of noticing. This is not going to stop, folks. If the Supreme Court decides, which it's scheduled to do this week, that those tariffs are illegal, but they are, by the way. The United States Constitution says that the House of Representatives is where all taxing is to be done. They have the authority. They had nothing to do with it. Mr. Trump just did this, like he's killing those people in the narco boats. And he knows something that my growing up in a very Catholic community, we all learned it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. If you think about that, you'll understand why that's a popular saying in certain communities. Okay. 30 years ago, the relationship between what an executive got at a big corporation and what the average worker got was about 30, 35 to 1. Go back to the 60s and 70s, that was normal. What is the relationship now? About 300 to 1. Do you understand? The executives, the employers, raised their income much, much higher than it raised yours. They don't have an affordability problem. You may. They don't. That's the message here. To say it now in the way I started. When an empire goes down, we have seen in every example of which there is a record that the people at the top, those with the money and those with the power, hold on to their wealth and are in a position to do it. Which means the cost of the decline is offloaded, doesn't fall on them. It falls on us, on the rest of the people. And it takes the form of an affordability crisis. The fundamental confrontation you have to face then is that the people who ran this empire are in the best position to hold on to the wealth it acquired, and that's what they're doing. And to you, they give a very large middle finger. And the only question, the only one worth asking, is whether you will tolerate it or not. All the rest are details. Here's a detail that was surfaced yesterday out of the mouth of our president, who, because he doesn't understand much of this, mumbles stuff, which is very instructive because the normal kind of person who sits in his position knows that you don't say these things. These are kept quiet. So he announced a great breakthrough, a 50-year mortgage. I don't know if you caught this, but let me be sure you did. The normal mortgage in this country, long-term mortgage, is 30 years. Rarely do they go beyond that. You can get a 5, a 15, a 10, up to 30 years. And for those of you not clear about it, all of the mortgage is the name of a loan, just a particular kind of loan. But there's nothing to it other than a loan. A mortgage, somebody lends somebody money to buy a house or a home. So we call it a mortgage. Just like if it's a tax on an imported product, it's a tariff rather than just a word tax. Okay, so if you have 30 years to pay back a loan to buy a house, then each year, roughly speaking, you've got to pay back the creditor 1/30th of the value of the loan plus interest. So that over 30 years, you've paid it back. Obviously, if people are having trouble with their house, here's what we can do. We can lend it to you for 50 years, which means from the time you graduate high school till the day you die, you'll owe money. Lots of it. This is helping you. Mr. Trump is helping you. What he doesn't mention is those extra 20 years, you'll have to be paying interest, which means the house will cost you way more with all of that added interest than it would have if you'd paid it off in 30 years. You poor schmuck. That's how the government, I want you to understand how you look to them. And ask yourself whether they deserve the respect that is asked of you. This is not a solution. This is more of the same game. The president ought to be called what my parents used to call people like this, the flim-flam man. The one who comes in with a great deal you really got to have right away. Quick, before you understand what's going on, give me some money. What is going to happen here? This has been going on for a while, folks, and it's not stopping. And there's nothing the United States can do. You've got to understand that, because most of the causes of this lie outside the control of the United States. Mr. Maduro in Venezuela, who has a lot to be worried about, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, full of bombs and planes, the Gerald R. Ford by name, for those of you who pay attention, has just entered the Venezuelan area. This is usually a setup. The United States has moved troops to a number of bases that are within half an hour, 45-minute air flight to Venezuela. Venezuela is a small, poor country that has been subject to sanctions by the United States for decades now. Not as long as Cuba, but for decades. This is all very familiar. You put a lot of sanctions, you hobble the country, and then you do provocations, and then the CIA does its thing, and then you invade. And that's called the Monroe Doctrine, to clean it up. All right, Russia has announced that it will not permit that to happen. Whoa. Did you hear what I just told you? Russia has announced no more Monroe Doctrine. No more agreeing that the Western Hemisphere is the United States' place. Now, what does that mean? Who knows? But the world is changing. Nobody did that before, including the Russians. Russia and China together, folks, is now a much bigger richer economic powerhouse than we are. I left it to last because I know in America it scares people. But in economics, we make a little calculation, a kind of a shorthand. We get a measure of the total output of goods and services in a country in one calendar year, 12 months. And we call that the GDP, the gross domestic product. You'll hear it referred to in radio and television all the time. And we compare countries to get a sense of how big they are. To give you an idea, the United States GDP is now in the neighborhood of $25 trillion, give or take. The GDP of Russia, 3 or 4 trillion. You understand? Russia was never an economic threat to the United States. Not when it was the Soviet Union, and not now. If you thought that, it's the same problem. You live in a political, ideological fog. Not your fault. What air are you going to breathe other than the air all around you? So that's what you breathe. And that's what you take in your brain. So the United States has no economic issue with Russia. Not at all. Never did. What is the GDP of the People's Republic of China? United States, 25. United States is 25. Russia, say 4. China, 18 or 19. Okay? Russia and China are closer together as allies and friends than they have ever been right now. And they have an alliance with a dozen other countries, more than a dozen, but I'll use a dozen, called the BRICS. When you see that referred to in the newspaper, pay attention. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That is the alliance, the center of which is the People's Republic of China. If you add up the GDP of all the BRICS countries, China, India, all of them, it works out to about 35% of the total output of the world, of our whole planet. Just those countries. If you do the same for the United States and the G7, that's the big alliance of the United States. That's the United States, Canada, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, and Britain. Total GDP of the G7 is about 28% of the world's output. So do you understand that Russia-China is a much, much bigger, richer core of the world economy? We are not what we were. Not even close. The two were the same. The GDP of the two blocks were the same in the year 2020. And since then, the gap has grown always in the favor of the People's Republic of China. The United States has tried everything to stop it. Everything has failed. This year, 2025, the Chinese economy will grow, GDP, about 3 times what the United States will grow, and that has been the norm for the last 40 years. Last step. Unspoken until now, one last dimension of all of what I've been describing. Another sign of a declining empire is the inability of the political system to manage the economic system in a way that's acceptable to the people who live there. That's why so often as empires decline, they break up inside. the different parts of the empire fight against one another, actually accelerating the decline of the empire. They don't hold their unity. They begin to dissolve. For the last 40 years, the United States has been unable to pay directly for its own functioning, which is why we have gone from 35 years ago, when our national debt was a few $100 billion, to our current situation where the national debt is $36 trillion. This is an amount of money borrowed that the world had never seen before. The United States owes more money than any other country on earth, and they're not close. Year in and year out, the government of the United States doesn't raise taxes, but spends a lot of money. And the only way it can do that is if it borrows the money with which to spend, since it's not raising the taxes. Why is it not raising the taxes? Because corporations and the rich have purchased the political system. They give money to the politicians who do not tax them. That's why the first thing Mr. Trump did when he was president the first time was to get the tax bill of 2017. And the first thing he did this time on his second presidency was the big, beautiful tax bill I just mentioned to you. He's taken care of business. He's taken care of his donors. And the Democratic Party does pretty much the same thing. Not as aggressively, not as big. They can always have that T-shirt on with a finger pointing at Trump saying, we're not as bad as him. Which is, by the way, their electoral strategy, which last Tuesday suggested isn't working so well anymore. It's so bad, the borrowing, that the world has taken a step in the last 2 years, and I'm going to close with that. The world has taken a step that no one foresaw because no one wanted to see what it means that the empire is over. There are 3 companies that rate the credit worthiness of all borrowers, all corporations, all governments. One is called Standard & Poor, another one is called Moody's, and a third one is called Fitch. They are the 3 companies, all American, who will tell you the credit worthiness of a county in Myanmar and of a factory in China and so on. That's their job. They measure. All 3 of them have now dropped the credit rating of the United States from AAA, which is the best, to AA. The United States used to be AAA. Are there other countries that have AAA? Yes, quite a few. But not this one. You live in a country that is no longer safe to lend money to. And the big banks and insurance companies, the foreign countries who are the big lenders to the United States, you don't know much about it because few of you in this room, I'm guessing I'm right about this, correct me if I'm wrong, but few of you are in the habit of lending big bucks to the United States government. In other words, you have no idea what I'm talking about because it's not about you. If you're not a billionaire, you're not in this operation. So now the United States has a new problem. It solved its difficulties for the last 30 years by borrowing wild amounts of money, and now it can't do that anymore, like every creditor, every borrower who goes too far. Can't do it. Why are the creditors worried? Because they're worried for the same reason that they worry about all the other countries that borrow and then hit a moment when they don't or can't borrow anymore. Here's when that moment happens, and you'll see how close we are. It's when masses of people go into the streets of these countries and shake their fingers at the leaders, and they say, you're not taking care of our food and our clothing and our shelter and our schools and our medical care because you're saving money to pay off the rich people you borrowed from. We won't let you starve our children, remember Andrew, in order to pay off the rich. Our children can't eat, so your mansion can have another layer of gold paint? Really? You know what happens at that moment? The leaders have a sudden change of heart, and they call up the creditors and they say, we can't pay. We can't. And even more important, we won't. One of the countries that does this on a regular basis and gets away with it because it knows how to play politics is a country called Argentina. 2 weeks ago, they did this game again. The right-wing crazy person, I don't use that term, but if you want to see a leader who's genuinely right off his noggin, go look at Mr. Milei in Argentina. He announced, we're bankrupt and we have no money and we can't repay our creditors. Mr. Trump gave him, dependent, a little unclear, somewhere between 20 and 40, ready? $1 billion. Way more money than it would have needed to take care of all the people on SNAP. In order to save him, because he's a right-winger, he likes Trump. To save him, he did that. And the United States, in most cases, Republicans and Democrats alike, whistle, look at the moon, check their underwear. That's what they did. But what is this? Now the United States has to look at least like it's doing something. And that's what we're living through. Can we stick it to the federal employees? Let's try that. Can we stick it to the SNAP people? Let's try that. Let's do this. Let's do that. How about a 50-year mortgage? I mean, it is everything but looking at the question. So here are the two things just to end with. The government could be called in to do all kinds of things to solve this problem. Things that our political leaders do not even venture. Although, because he deserves it, Mr. Mamdani does. He talks about taxing the rich a little. He talks about bringing rents down. He's addressing affordability, which was a theme of his campaign and had something to do with the extraordinary vote that he got. For those of you that are not familiar, he got more than half the vote, which means Mr. Mamdani got more votes than all of the other candidates combined. That's an amazing achievement. It tells you about New York and solves all kinds of questions about New York that everybody ought to think about, whatever happens in the future. What can the government do? The government can bring down the rent. Take 2 seconds to do that. How do I know that? Because here in the United States, before World War II, remember when we didn't have the Cold War? Hundreds of American cities, just in case you're not familiar with American history, hundreds of cities had socialist mayors. That's not a new phenomena in our country. Not at all. Big cities, Milwaukee, Bridgeport, Connecticut, all kinds of cities had socialist mayors. State legislators had huge numbers of socialists sitting on those legislators. I used to have fun asking my students. I'll ask you now. Can you guess which of the 50 states was the one in which socialists had the biggest block of seats that they won in elections? You won't guess. So I'll tell you. Oklahoma. Yeah, Oklahoma. What was red can be blue, and vice versa. Don't be so quick to assume that it is forever what it is now. Wasn't the case. But even if there were a government committed. And let's give Mr. Mamdani the benefit of the doubt. They too will have to make the final confrontation. Are you going to allow the ruling class of this country, the people who sit at the top, the CEOs, the super rich, the leading politicians, to continue to protect the wealth of those who already have at the expense of everybody else? Either you are or you aren't. The university where I work here, the new school, which I teach at from time to time, sent us all an email this last week. I don't know if it's public. I don't care either. It explained to us that next year they will admit 0 graduate students, with one exception, the psychology department. Every other department, I'm in the economics department, will have no graduate program anymore. That's all. No more. All over the country, people are not going to colleges and universities. Many of them are going to close. You better, if you have relatives or friends, they're going to hear about it. Why? Because the people in power, Harvard and Yale, are going to continue. I know, I get their memos because I'm an alumnus of that place. They're rolling in money. They always were. They assume that the universe is organized in that way. They're fine. It's all the little schools, the state school. They're closing left and right. Americans can't afford it. It's another affordability problem. It's very expensive, and the only way you can do it is load up with levels of debt, which will look really good alongside your 50-year mortgage. And foreigners aren't coming here anymore. Why? Because our crazy president, desperate, went international in April and declared economic war against everybody, the whole world. Do you realize, and if not, let me be the one to tell you, every foreign leader, good ones, bad ones, and in between, now has an easy way to go to his or her people when there's a problem in their economy and say, we call him Mr. Trump, and he hit us with the tariffs, and I was doing great, but it's all his fault. If you think Americans are not desirable around the world, wait 6 months, a year from now. It should be really stunning. The British Secret Service, who have committed every crime there is and many more, told the United States yesterday that they would no longer share intelligence with the United States because of the killing of those 76 people in the narco boats, because that violates international law, British law, American law, and fill in the blank every other law. The British have done that all the time. But now they get a chance, and they were not going to miss it, to point the finger somewhere else. We are in a very bad position. When I sit down and have a coffee or a drink with my fellow economists, left-wingers like me, right-wingers, and folks in the center, we don't agree on how the United States got into the current situation, and we don't agree on how to get out. But this is what we agree on. This is the worst condition of the American economy in our lifetime. That we all agree. That calls for basic change. You're not going to solve this, not with this election or that one, or this law or that regulation. We're way beyond all of that. It's like a doctor having to tell you, look, take an aspirin, take 2, take 6, but that's not going to solve your problem here. May make the pain go away for a little while. More power to you. But you got to deal with this other because it's going to get progressively worse. We're living in a country that is excluding people from educations, story of the new school, from food stamps, from proper management of the airport, from everything, education, and the impact of all of these cuts, that takes a while. Many of the people worked, I don't know if you're familiar with the federal government, because they had time coming to them even after they're no longer on the payroll. So it takes time for all, but that's coming now over the next little while. And the elections last Tuesday are a strong indicator that the acceptance of what's going on is not going well for Mr. Trump. And given who he is and the people around him, that means more desperate acts of the quality of a 50-year mortgage. So I'll stop there, and if you have some questions or comments, I'll be glad to try to